All right, a very good morning. In case you are just joining us, but if you have been with us since we started the show till now, we really appreciate your company on this very important day in our country, as Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u is set to be delivering the budget for the financial year 2024-2025, an activity that is going to be happening actually even in Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. But here in studio this morning, we are just sort of like setting the pace to help you understand what are some of the issues that we should be discussing when it comes to the budget for the next financial year, and whether the government has done what it should, that is to address some of the pivotal sectors that affect the common mwananchi. And of course, I just want to take you through what the budget has been looking like over the years, and what we are observing is a trend of an increment in the budget from the previous financial years. Of course, this particular year, the chair of the National Assembly's Budget and Appropriations Committee was saying that it is slightly below what was initially captured in the budget policy statement, but it is still higher. In fact, in Kenya's history, we are looking at a budget of about 4 trillion shillings, which is for the financial year 2024-2025. This is higher than what was recorded in the previous financial year, which was 2023-2024. You can see there 3.7 trillion shillings. And of course, in 2022-2023, the budget was standing at 3.4 trillion shillings. A lot has been done just to, allocate money in the different sectors. And we will be looking at how, this budget has captured the priorities for Kenya this particular financial year. And you can see there, the sector of education has gotten an allocation of over 600 billion shillings, with, of course, focus being on basic education, which touches on secondary and primary schools getting 142 billion shillings, university getting 127 billion shillings, and of course 30 billion for technical and vocational training. Other areas that of course have been prioritized in the education sector include the Teacher Service Commission, which has gotten an allocation to be able to address issues such as employing the junior secondary school teachers who are currently on internship. We have an allocation there for the free day secondary school. And of course, just to address issues of infrastructure and what is needed for the junior secondary school there, getting an allocation of 30.6 billion shillings. And of course, looking at institutions of higher learning in terms of scholarships and loans, you can see there an allocation of 55 billion shillings. Of course, we'll be discussing more on these allocations as we continue. We have our panel in studio this particular morning. Ayub Abdikadir is on the other side with them. But we want you to be part of this conversation because it concerns you and I. And we have this question that we are asking you just to give us your perspective. And this is our question of the day. Which sector do you want prioritized in the budget for the financial year 2024-2025, and why? Which sector do you want prioritized in the budget for the financial year 2024-2025, and why? Remember, the budget will be delivered this particular afternoon, but it would be interesting to hear your thoughts just on what you feel is of priority. We'll be sampling your feedback as we continue to have this particular conversation in studio. And I'll be coming back just to break down more on the key sectors and how much approximately they have been given for this financial year. So give us your thoughts. We'd like to weigh in on that. But for now, I'll hand you over back to Ayub Abdikadir on the other side of the studio.
Thank you, Safin. And more breakdown of the sector allocations will be happening in the course of this broadcast with my colleague Safin, who will be on the Super Bowl to give you a breakdown of what will go into the specific sectors that the government has prioritized, including health, education, and whether the allocations done are enough. And I come to you again, Honorable Makali Molo, on the aspect of now the Finance Bill 2024. This is basically the revenue-raising measure that informs how we are going to be running the financial year 24-25. And it seems that unlike the Finance Bill of 2023, now an Act of Parliament, which was high on direct taxes, this is on indirect taxes. I mean, just when are we going to get it right in terms of expanding our tax base? Because there seems to be a lesser-like attention on the small minority of the employed folks, who are about 3 million thereabout, and are burdening the shoulders, who are burdening the burden, who are shouldering the burden of the others as well in the economy, and now they will be hit hard, because if you look at the income tax, where the focus is for the government, they expect to raise 1.2 trillion, and this is likely going to eat up already sliced and slashed pay slips and squeezed household budgets and livelihoods that are on the brink because of subsequent taxation and the taxation regime that basically isn't healthy for them and their progress. So how can we expand our tax base and focus on the other folks majorly in the informal sector?
Quite a good question, Ayubu. Let's just put the figures on the table. The 2023 Finance Act was targeted to collect about 214 billion. As at now, and I think we have about 20 days to the end of the financial year, we've collected,
less than 20 days actually.
The reports we have, we've collected about 131 billion, which means we are around 53% of the collection. Now this one, the 2024, is projected to collect 302 billion.
Yeah,
302 billion only. 302. And the assumption is that, like we've used the 214 as our baseline, because that's what we'd expect to collect using the 2023. Now we have collected only about 131, which is about 53%. Now, in a situation where you have collected only 53% out of the targeted, and you use 53 as your baseline, then it means automatically the 302 is like it's a tall order. We might not be able to reach there.
Predictably, now, going by the
this simple analysis, this simple statistics, they don't lie. Now the question we're asking is very important. How then? That means automatically the tax rates we are using are not giving us the revenue expected from those taxes, and more likely we can conclude that then it means we have reached a level where increasing the tax rates will not help you get more money. So it brings me up to your question. So now the trick is to expand the base so that we bring more people to the tax bracket. Now the challenge we have in this country is that most of our setup is informal. Majority of the Kenyans are earning their living from informal sector. I think almost about over 80%. Of the way our economy is structured is informal. Informal sector is challenged in terms of, it's not as well structured as the way you would get money from your pay slip. So we need to come up with very innovative ways of reaching out to that informal sector so that we collect more revenue. Unfortunately, what is happening in this country, the informal sector is hardly taxed. And basically because of the challenges you go through when you are. And that's why you saw, like last year, I think it's this year, KRA provided about 1,000 tax assistants so that they're able now to go to the informal sector and see whether we can collect more money from the informal sector. But I'm telling you, generally, it's not going to be easy. And that's why you see what is happening now. Kenyans are thinking more about how do I avoid paying tax than how do I pay my tax and still survive. Because now, for you to survive more likely, you have to think about which tax do I should not pay so that I save something to push to the rest of my needs. And these are so we are not. It's not going to be easy. This is the time not to. I don't envy the PS Treasury, the CS Treasury. They're in a very hard position because at the end of the day, as Senator here said, everybody is saying we want more. We want more. All the way from the MCR, the MPs, everybody saying, give us this road, give us this. And you've seen, like now, we are, as we discussed here.
But where do you lay the blame then? I mean, there must be accountability, isn't it?
Yeah, accountability must be there.
When there is a target, you have to achieve that.
Yes.
The pathway can be bushy, it can be bumpy.
Yes.
And allow me to quote what the president said on the 26th of May, 2023. This is more than a year ago when he visited the KRA at Times Tower. He said this means the Kenya Revenue Authority must stop the tiresome drama of pretending to be fighting with stakeholders over new technology and avoid irritating Kenyans with proposals to spend billions of shillings on irrelevant projects. The Kenyan people, the taxpayers, the president said, expect no less, deserve no less, and are entitled to no less. Still, they seem to be not learning the trade. I mean, why does the government set this target? Yet there are economic experts who know the reality, as you have said, from the pattern predictably, that we can attain A we cannot attain B, we may attain C.
You know, as I said earlier, I think I explained why our expenditure is that high. We gave some explanation as to why we have that high expenditure. But I think the other thing we also need to note, if you look at what happened during the era of the regime of President Kibaki, the issue of accountability was very critical. You know, if I'm sure I'll give out my 50 shillings out of my salary, and I'll not have to go to the hospitals and buy drugs from the chemistry, my kids will be able to access education without much problem. Yeah. I'm telling you, Kenyans can even pay more taxes. But know what is happening? Anytime we go to the rural, anytime I sit in my office as a member of parliament, the number of people come to my office mostly are saying, I've gone to the general hospital, I've been given a prescription, and there are no drugs. So I've been requested to go and buy drugs in a private chemist. And now they're telling you, can you support me? So we are saying we need to get value for the tax. And I'm sure if we improved accountability, and the issue around corruption, if we improved accountability of our taxes, we would be able to collect more because people will build trust in the system and will pay taxes. But all said and done, I think where we are now, we have to think outside the box in terms of how do we finance our budgets. Because I don't think this idea of taxation is like, and I don't think it's the only way. As an economist, I think there are things, we have two ways. We can look more at the expenditure side and see what we can do. Because generally, if we got our planning right, you know, even during your normal thing, you would say, I would have wanted to build a house this year. Yeah. But when I look at my income, I would rather push it to next year. And that does not mean you will not sleep. You will still sleep. So that in terms of structuring our expenditure, there are things we could, without any political pressure, because the political pressure is actually so high, we could easily structure our implementation programs in a way that, with the time, we'll be able to achieve what we want without harassing the person. It's like killing the cow which gives you milk. Where will you get more milk then? It means you stop getting any milk. But if you just did the milking in a phased out way, you are likely to continue getting milk for some time. So I think it's not easy. I don't want to pretend that we are in an easy situation, all of us. Yeah. As Kenyans, we need to brave ourselves for these challenges and ask ourselves, what do we need to get out of it? And I think all these proposals are on the table. It's a matter of goodwill to implement some of them and move forward. Okay.
Yes. And I come to you, and we'll talk about corruption and the place of loopholes, because the budget making process is very key that we talk about, and some of the glaring mistakes that are pointed out by the controller of budget, which again comes to the National Assembly because of the powers that it's given by the Constitution. Well, talking about this, and on the indirect taxes, the bill is heavy on it. This is the consumption tax. But here, you have industries that are warning of massive job losses, and worse, relocation from the Kenyan market, which because of the high cost of production. It then means that people will not have an income. And to the extent that we are not even talking about the disposable income. First, we're talking about the income itself. Right. I mean, then how then do you focus on the consumption tax here when you have the value of the shilling in the people's pocket lessening, or for those of the disposable income, they'll be thinking about, okay, what is the priority area here? I mean, how does the government balance this out? And do you think that there is an adequate attention in looking at this and the proposals contained in the bill?
Thank you, Ayub. And I think what Dr. Makari has said is very, very important. That we need to look at where you are coming from in terms of what we've been able to achieve in the previous years. So looking at the revenue that you're projecting for the current financial year, that is 24-25, it's possible that if we implement these proposals in the finance bill, likely that you'll even collect less. Why do I say so? Just what you've said, that if an entity now moves out of Kenya, we lose on the other taxes, right? So look, a scenario where we'll collect less than what you're already collecting, right? Then again, all Kenyans definitely, we are all looking at our pockets, yeah? Could be have to change the menu in the house because now the shillings are becoming fewer. So then that leads not to lower a collection of consumption costs. We look at last year, there were two policy documents that were put before the House. That's the medium-term revenue strategy and the national tax policy. We look at the national tax policy. The key was to make sure that our tax policies are able to predict what to expect into the future and also some certainty. So when I come in as an investor, I would expect that this rate will be constant for some time, and therefore I'm able to plan and also know when I get my employees, the level of employment costs that I will incur. But in the year, we got the housing levy and also now the SHIF, yeah? That already sets the manufacturer or the owner of the business out of it, yeah? Then now we look at the excise, or rather the indirect tax proposals right now in the Finance Bill 2024. For instance, excise duty on raw materials, yeah? You're saying you are not going to allow the manufacturer to deduct this one while they are declaring their output excise. So what does that mean? That means automatically the price of the commodity will go up. You see, the cost of production of this manufacturer will go up. As a manufacturer, of course, their shareholders want a return on their investment. So what do? They either roll back, they go to neighboring countries and we start importing, which again is more expensive for us even from a forex and the deficit in terms of our dollar reserves, yeah? So this issue of tax has to be looked into from a larger perspective. When I say I have motor vehicle tax, what is the ripple effect? All of us came here somehow through transport, yeah? All goods move through transport. So this will come into my pocket again and take it away. So in as much as we have the income tax, which I'm being taxed through my pay slip and the affordable housing and as well as the other levies, again now, this taking away through the consumption cost. So what you're saying, basically, it is not easy. It's a very tricky balance. But what Makari said is very, very important. What are our priorities? Let's be honest. I mean, in our conversation, is this revenue achievable? If not, what can we work with, right? What can we prioritize in terms of our expenditures? Can we negotiate some of these dates for a longer period? So basically, that is what I would say. In terms of the policy, in terms of the tax bill, this needs to be rechecked because this revenue is on paper. It might be very hard to get even half of it.
Okay. Wycliffe, Anne talks about basically the sessional paper 2 of 2023 that has been published by the National Treasury. And looking at that vis-a-vis the proposals contained in the Finance Bill 2024, do you see a match of the two in terms of one gelling into the other, and is it predictable?
Unfortunately, Ayub, it doesn't, and that is actually a problem as a country. We've seen, and I'll also allude to what Anne spoke about, the draft national policy, which we really hoped, because some of us pushed for it, because we must have, we should be able to predict our tax environment, because that is how you encourage production. Investors are coming into the country investing on the basis that this is what we expect in the next few years. But then when you to do a complete about turn on the policy that you actually thought it was going to work for you, what does that do to the investors? And also, just to comment on the question you asked, Anne, in terms of manufacturers, because this is actually what is driving production. And the biggest problem I think we've had over the years is that we are not able to tell what is us as a country. Is our budget increasing production, for example? If you look at the numbers that we've seen, that manufacturing was giving us 11% of our GDP in the year 2011. Right now we're at 7. That is as at end of 2022. We're at 7%. In other words, that over the years, the absolute number may have gone up, but in terms of percentage to the GDP, that has gone down. And part of the reasons is because we've seen investors move out of the country because our policies are not predictable, and that becomes a problem. Specifically to your question, what we've seen in the Finance Bill 2024 has been about turn on some of what we expected from for example, the MTRS that was given last year, where we expected that for example, VAT is expected that in 3 years' time shall have come down to at least 14%. And I'll tell you that there's a specific reason why we thought a reduction of some of these rates is going to spur growth. Because back to the question we asked, how do we increase the tax bracket? How do we bring in what Dr. Makali was talking about? How do we bring in the informal sector? Now, the informal sector is very hard to tax. I agree with Daktari. But can we also look at encouraging some of these players to come into the fold? Most people, again, as Daktari said, have no problem actually paying taxes if we showed them value, but most importantly, if we showed them that it's not as punitive, because the perception out there is that taxes are too high, so we rather hide if we can. What I see is if we change some of these rates, have friendly rates, we're going to have more people volunteering to come in and saying, you know what, we want to participate in building our nation.
Okay, but how can we then achieve that? Because it basically looks like an informalization of our economy, going by what you said. And for example, the excise duty offsets what's payable on raw materials as per the imports that aren't talked about, but the Finance Bill 2004 talks about a deletion. It proposes a deletion of the same. These inconsistencies, and you talked about manufacturing, is this what's hampering and more or less causing their departure from the Kenyan market, and with it, the capital flight that goes with that, the consequence of which is job losses or rendering some unemployed and pushing them into the abyss or on the cliff towards poverty? I mean, what then can the government do in this regard? Because these are clear policies that are in contrast with the economic growth that it keeps on talking about and the prosperity that we are promised.
True. Actually, our expectation was that on that particular issue of input excess duty, our expectation was that, and we kept on pushing, that can we have manufacturers claim much more, because the current Excise Act gives manufacturers a leeway to claim back input excess on raw materials only. So what we've been pushing is to include the other excess duty on other items, for example, packaging. So our expectation was that the Finance Bill 2024 was to include this. But then what did we have is now a deletion of the raw materials. So what we already have, instead of keeping it there, it is now being made worse. And that exactly explains why manufacturers are saying, you know what, we can't go set up shop elsewhere. We do not have to build this country. Yeah. We can build countries that are ready to have us in. And we've got to look at this on the ripple effect. Because when these manufacturers go out, you then expect job losses. So the disposable income goes down. Yeah. The same people we expected to come in and now spend and give us more revenue on the consumption taxes are now going to be jobless. So even as this bill looks more into indirect taxes, who are these people who are going to incur indirect taxes? Because now the consumer is no longer able to consume. So you expect that those taxes are going to come down. Okay,
and the prospects of job losses that were made by the companies and industry players who appeared before the committee that's chaired by Kuria Kimani. Senator Olekina, and when on the last day of the public participation exercise, the chairperson Kuria Kimani pledged that it's not going to be an exercise in futility, that the submissions, he said, you Kenyans made before my committee will be considered. Next week, that will be tabled at the National Assembly, its report, that is the committee's report. Do you think that is going to be fulfilled? Is it going to be realized?
No, absolutely not. Kenyan views are never considered, and that's a fact. You know, let's call a spade a spade. But let me go back to something which my two colleagues here in the panel have discussed about. This issue of us having tax policies which are not predictable. You know, it is completely destroying this economy. A lot of investors are moving out. We've got investors who supply animal feeds. They're moved out of this country. When you call them, they tell you, I'm out. I can still provide you, but now you have to pay for the transportation and the taxes for you to be able to import the goods from another country. Earlier on, you quoted the president going to KRA and saying one thing. But actually what is happening is completely different, because the Finance Act proposes changes to the Tax Procedures Act, including doing away with alternative dispute resolution, whereby KRA is not now treating businesses as partners. And I think what we need to do for us to grow this economy, it is not quantum physics. It is very simple. KRA must be friends. You know, if I take what the president said, and I hope he meant what he said, the irony is that what is happening is not what he said. Because KRA should be friendlier to the businesses. Now, if you talk about not, penalties being imposed, you have no time to be able to go even and go through it, with them and discuss. There is no alternative dispute. It is their way or the highway, So what will happen? A lot of businesses will move out. Earlier on, you talked about the Finance Act. Mm-hmm. This is what is happening. From a legislator's point of view and from a senator's point of view, the Finance Act is illegal. And why do I say that? Housing. Number one, the housing levy or the Housing Act, which was passed by both houses, the Supreme Court has already pronounced itself on bills that affect counties, on matters that has to be considered by both houses. They have to be considered. You cannot pass a law subjecting it to the two houses of parliament, then you come and you, with an omnibus bill called the Finance Act, and you amend the housing levy. And what they did, the Housing Act, what they did in that is that they amended such that if you buy a house, so that you see the irony in all these affordable housing issues, there was a provision that said you cannot sell that house for a period of time. Now, they are removing that completely so that the Bwenyenyes and all the rich people can continue buying those houses and reselling those houses. That is issue number one.
Is that a proposal under this bill?
On the Finance Act.
Okay.
And what happens?
On the bill, because
on the bill. And what happens is that if they want to amend that, the first thing that they should do to avoid lengthy litigations, because you see the problem is this: these bills are normally drafted by technocrats who do not understand legislative drafting that has got to go before both houses of parliament. Leave the drafting to parliament, But now everything, if it's drafted by the Treasury and then it's brought to us and we're told just pass it the way it is and don't make changes, we'll end up going to court. So, number one, the Housing Act is being amended. Number two, the PFM Act is being amended. When you amend the PFM Act through the finance bill, without subjecting it to the Senate, expect senators to go to court or someone else to go to court and say, this is ridiculous. You are amending the PFM Act to now introduce an accrual basis of accounting from the cash basis of accounting. Number three, you are amending the Data Protection Act, which affects both houses, whereby you are now saying county governments can be able to give out information. These are things that, if things is affecting one house, please take it to both houses. If it's affecting both houses, take it to both houses. Do it in a neater way.
But Senator, because you have mentioned a very key point, one of the key accomplishments and that we can derive from Katiba 2010 is that Parliament or the National Assembly, not the Treasury, makes the budget. Article 210, all taxes can only be raised by law. And the real tax setters, therefore, are the lawmakers, where you two sit, you and Dr. Makali Mulu, the bicameral setup. Why is the role flipped?
Because of interest.
Who does so? Isn't that,
and I think
isn't that contrary to the law? Isn't that a
It is contrary
violation
to the law, but let us call a spade here. And I like using that phrase. Because most of our laws are not drafted in Parliament. Most of our laws, there's a hidden agenda. When it comes to the issue of revenue-raising taxation, it is controlled by the IMF and the World Bank. So they say, this is what we want you to do, this is why we want you to tax bread, and then come up with an argument and say, bread is consumed by middle class. This is why we want you to tax transportation of sugarcane from the farmer to the milling plant, and you are now killing the farmer. Because the farmer already is getting peanuts. This farmer, that's why I call sugarcane a lazy man crop. Because you plant it, you wait for like 18 months for you to be able to harvest your first crop. The moment you have harvested it, for you to transport it from your farm to the milling plant, you have to pay taxes on it. For you to consume bread, you have to pay taxes on it. Come on. You know, why don't we just look at what we're doing and ask ourselves? I've seen figures. You know, you talk about one, going from 3.4 trillion, 3.7 trillion to 4 trillion.
Okay.
But what is the net effect? A lot of pending bills. Yesterday, we had a session with the Cabinet Secretary of Transport, Murkomen. And the problem is that a lot of roads which have stalled, they have stalled because they have not been paid. Okay? Why have they not been paid? They were in a budget. Everything was budgeted. It was committed. So a little money was paid. The contractor decided to take off because he has not been paid the rest of his money. How do we sustain that economy? So what we are saying here is this. Over-taxation is killing Kenyans. You know, and Kenyans out there must stand up and rise up and say enough is enough. We cannot continue being overtaxed. You know, our colleagues here have said, I buy a motor vehicle. I use it to transport. Now, I paid taxes. I paid import tax because that car came from outside the country. It was not manufactured in Kenya. I paid excise duty. I paid, rail levy. I paid IDF, import declaration levy. Now, when I've already paid for everything that I'm supposed to pay, you now want to start charging me a tax for using that vehicle.
Okay, we'll talk about that because that is a whole proposal that has led to concerns from members of the public. But I'm still with the role of Parliament here and it sitting at a fulcrum point, Dr. Makali, coming to you here. Why then does it appear that the Treasury mandarins and experts from the National Treasury seem to be the drivers and the determinants of our spending and the taxes that they impose on the taxpayer and not Parliament, yet the House where you sit in is guaranteed that constitutional authority. If you read the PFM Act, which mentions Parliament so many times, therefore the crucial role that you bear, and you seem to be more or less either under executive pressure at times, if you're in the ruling coalition, or in the major aspects, you portray an image, you parliamentarians, of always feeding from the same trough when it comes to your binding or common interests.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe before I come to the issue of Parliament and budget making, just comment about some of the issues which have been raised by my colleagues. The issue of manufacturing in this country, and I think it has come out very well that the contribution of manufacturing to the GDP is on a downward trend. You know, are you a businessman? The reason why you set up a business is to make profit. So if you are not making profit, you have no business being in that country. And I think that's a challenge we have. As Kenyans, we are forgetting that we are in a global economy. And issues of competitiveness must be considered. If I find it cheaper to do my business in Uganda and I optimize my profits as compared to Kenya, as a business person, I'll shift to Uganda and set up my business. And I think the consequences of that have been explained. So it is important the executive in this country appreciates the fact that we are in a competitive world. And if wherever our cost of production becomes higher, we will be pushing investors out of the country. The second point, if you look at the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, manufacturing is at the core of it. There are serious value chain issues in that agenda. How do you add value if you are not in the manufacturing? So it's like giving in one hand, taking from the other hand. You remain in the same position. So to me, I think this is important. Then the issue of our role as Parliament. I think the law is very clear. When you look at the law, the word of the law is very clear that Parliament has a lot of power in budget making. But the reality is different. And I think that's what we are not saying, me and the Senator here, that we put our things very well. When we are public participation, we ask people tell us, then we say it's not going to be an activity. We are not just going to listen to you. What else would have the chair said other than telling them we are not going to factor in you are going to factor in your public participation? That's the only thing he could say. He didn't have any other word to say. He had to assure the public that I'll factor in your issues. But the truth of the matter is, after he met the public on Monday, on Tuesday, he met Treasury. And when he met Treasury, what did they say? We are asking you, or we are pleading with you, to approve the finance bill as it is. Yeah. Because if you change anything, then you will not be able to finance the budget.
But the point is, the point is, yes, please finish.
Yeah, I want to take you there. So what will happen, and you'll see this before next week, there will be called for a PG. Parliamentary group meeting.
Scheduled for Monday, actually.
You already said, I didn't know. So they will be called for that PG. So when they go there and they are sitting, all of them, they will be asked a simple question. Whose budget is this?
Government.
Kenya Kwanza government. Where do you belong? Under what platform did you ask for your votes? Under Kenya Kwanza agenda. So when we say we don't approve it, what are we doing to ourselves? We are actually kicking ourselves out of office. So what will happen? They will be told, go to the House bearing in mind what you do with this budget as implication on your own position. And me and the Senator Renda Maya will be waiting for them. So when they come, we make all the noise, we go, let's go voting. So even those who are saying, I'll vote no today, they vote yes. And the vote will be counted.
Okay. The point is then, Dr. Makali and Senator Ledamo Lekina, you're talking about more or less a remote management of affairs of Parliament.
It's not a secret.
Yes. And that's the House with the power to impeach any occupant of State House in Nairobi. Be it President William Ruto, be it the previous president, be it the forthcoming president that we will have. And this is then the question. Your party leader is His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka. Yeah. Your party leader is Raila Odinga. There was the Azimio Coalition political party. Hypothetically, had they been in Parliament, and this comes before for the financial year 2024-25, and then you are called for a PG at State House by, assume your party leadership, had you been in government, would you oppose it?
Absolutely.
Would you oppose it?
I'm telling you, it will depend on a number of things. Yeah. I want to talk like a buzz.
This format now.
I want to be very objective. Yeah. You know what will happen?
And you as an economist, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Azimio Coalition had their own pledges to Kenyans. And Rodam and me, we know very well. We go to rallies, we have told Kenyans, if we took power, by now Kenya will be taking 6,000 everybody home. You remember that was one of
our... How sure are we?
That's one of our... I'm just reminding you. That's what I'm reminding you. That was a promise to Kenyans when we were campaigning. And I can tell you for sure, him and me, anytime we got a mic, we were telling Kenyans, try as you see it. Now, the question, our leaders will be reminding us, do you remember what? But... So I'm telling you, as an economist from where I sit, there are serious things I don't agree with. But you know, the way our democracy is structured, you know, if you've lived in the UK, remember in the US where we have borrowed a lot of the things we are doing here, members of Parliament have a bit of independence. Actually, a party will allow you to vote with your conscience. You can say, I'm not going to vote for this bill, yes or no. I'll vote it no, even though the party position is yes, and explain why you're voting no, and then nobody will follow you up. The thing is, you vote yes when it's supposed to be no party position, and after that, you know what happens there. You have been one of us for many years.
But can I just...
But let's say something.
But Daktari, this is the point. Before I come to it, we sample the feedback and then get the accounts of Anne and Wycliffe. Why we're having such a discourse is to better our democracy.
Yes.
And you also understand that also in the context of the American democracy, there are instances where one Democrat can oppose an entire legislation before Congress that is in support of the government of the day or any given time. At this time, it's Biden presidency. What's the worst that can happen to a member of parliament if he opposes the coalition he belongs to of the day? A member of parliament has a security. I mean, you can't be sacked, for example.
Yeah, nobody can sack you because I believe the people.
Yet you embody a power to impeach a sitting president.
Yes.
Then where does this conscience, why does it suddenly evaporate when it comes to when you are certainly shepherded to State House, any given party that is in power, and then you suddenly detach or delink yourself from what concerns the major, the public, members of the public, and then you cozy up immediately with no answers and with no answer-seeking questions or probably asking the why aspect, and then you vote in a way that the occupant of status of that particular time wants? I mean, when can these end? Because the members of the public will see not the Kenya Kwanza MPs, but they see Parliament as a whole, and that's why confidence in where you sit the houses is at an all-time low.
Exactly.
How do you redeem yourself?
You know, I've been listening to Kenyans, and I've been to a number of these shows. What Kenyans are telling us is this year, 2024, next year when we go to Parliament, we have only one choice, the choice of voting. There's nothing called I will abstain. Kenyans say, if you abstain, we know you are not with us. If you vote yes, you know you are not with us. So we are in a very difficult situation, but I can tell you for sure, you will see people voting yes, knowing very well Kenyans out there saying, if you vote as you are our enemy number one, I will be taking you up. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, we have a cycle of 5 years where leaders are elected in or out. And I'm sure what will happen is, at the end of the day, Kenyans will be able to determine who is on their side and who is not on their side. But all said and done, one of the things I picked for many years I've been in Parliament is that at individual level, you can also take your position and live with the consequences.
Which ends up in the Hansard for history purposes. Okay, thank you. Senator Ann and Wycliffe, I'll take your accounts. Let's first sample the feedback from Kenyans who are watching this broadcast, because they are very key. They will all be watching what will be transpiring in Parliament later in the course of the day, when the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, will be reading the budget highlights in Parliament for the financial year 2024-25. And I now cross over to Safin, who will sample our feedback.
All right, thank you so much, Ayub. A great conversation you're having there in studio with your panel, of course, eliciting quite mixed reactions from our audience this particular morning. Remember, this morning we were asking you which areas of the budget do you want prioritized, and give us the reason why you feel that area is important. And this is what you're saying on social media at Citizen TV Kenya. And just to get to sample some of what you're saying, Waziri_Fujo, you're saying, I want to be surprised when Dr. Makali Mulu will vie to pass, will vote, yes, to pass the Finance Bill 2024. All right. We have Babu Michael KE. You're saying priority areas in the Finance Bill 2023 and now Finance Bill 2024 should and ought to be the area that strengthen the economy and put pesa mfukoni, which isn't the case. In fact, more money have been drained from mfukoni. More Kenyans are really struggling. Thank you, Babu. We have at Sawe, you're saying our budgets over time have not been realistic. We often allocate funds beyond our means or with misaligned priorities. It is imperative that Kenya Kwanza implements genuine austerity measures in the budget. Let's strive for once to budget within our actual resources. We have Remy Butia. You're saying healthcare financing should be increased. Improving health means increasing the population's average health and reducing health disparities. A healthy nation is a wealthy nation. Thank you, Remy. We have Engineer Lazaro. You're saying Parliamentary Budget Making Committee should prioritize what's good for Kenyans, not foreign dictatorship. Kenyans are looking upon their lawmakers to scrutinize what's in the budget and make an informed decision. All right, we have Eddie_Williams1. You're saying the problem is not even much on the Finance Bill 2024. The problem is, despite Kenyans preserving the 2023 punitive persevering, I meant the 2023 Punitive Finance Act, there are no gains from it, despite the assurance from the president that it would reduce borrowing and bring development home. All right, we have Reverend Harry_Kosgei. You're saying, though we are on a delicate balance, let Parliament consider the proposals made by Kenyans and all other stakeholders, thus reach a bipartisan approach for a win-win scenario. God bless. All right, we have Bob Otieno Owino. Bob, you're saying public participation is a mere comic because government was busy hoodwinking Kenyans with the dramas like the Ruto-Gachagua, Ruto-Uhuru, and now Gachagua's mode of transport, instead of encouraging them to participate. All right. That is what you're saying. A lot with regards to putting our leaders on the spot, asking them to represent the interest of Kenyans, read the budget, represent the complaints that people have. And we will be sampling more of your views. In case you have any questions as well for our panel this particular morning, we invite you to do so via our social media platforms at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Cheng, at Ayub Abdikadir, or on SMS 22422, and we'll forward those questions to our guests this morning. But of course, our big question of the day, just to remind you what we want you to weigh in on as well. As the budget is set to be read this particular afternoon, what are the priority areas that you feel should be given the weight in the 2024-2025 financial year budget, and why? What are those priority areas that you want to be given that weight in the 2024-2025 budget, and why? We'll be sampling more and even taking you through the sector allocations, and you can also tell us what you think about how much has been allocated to the different sectors as we continue to have this conversation. But for now, let me return you to Ayub Abdikadir.
Thank you, Safin. And later she will be back with a breakdown of the sector allocations to proceed with the events that will underpin the presentation that will be made at the National Assembly by the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. And I'll be back with her here on the broadcast for a more breakdown of the same as we also proceed with our discussion here in studio with two politicians and two experts on this special day, Budget 2024 for the financial year 24-25. We are due for a break here on the broadcast. When we come back, we proceed with Senator Ledama Olekina, Dr. Makalimulu, and Mangondo and Wycliffe with me here in studio as we take stock of what's forthcoming today here on the broadcast on this important day in the country's economic calendar. Stay tuned.